And I have a really fascinating tidbit to tie into this, which is Tesla, when they were negotiating with Panasonic, my understanding is they actually were so concerned about the liability of who would negotiate those raw material prices down the supply chain that they took on the burden of doing that themselves. They were like, nah, we're not going to let Panasonic just not care and let the lithium price float because they're going to pass it on to us. We're going to use our own battery materials supply chain contracts team to lock in contracts and place of pricing of these raw materials. Like, people don't even realize this isn't even a team that GM has or that Ford has, because they didn't even do this industry. So like you're saying, this is so much different than ICE. Like, the amount of layers that Tesla's had to go through. So it's not like this is overnight they're getting into mining. This has been a natural evolution of their vertical integration and this sort of, battery skunkworks unit within Tesla.
And that's true, but don't kid yourself. VW and GM are getting procurement teased together. They definitely understand now that it's a sense of urgency. But the problem that you have ultimately, Gali, is reinvestment economics. There is a Mexican standoff between the Albemarles and the Livents of this world with Tesla, because and I keep saying this, you've got to be very careful as an OEM. Are you playing checkers or are you playing chess? Because if you're shooting for the lowest possible price right now, you're playing checkers, because you're not giving the lithium producers enough operating margin to expand their production to supply you tomorrow. If you leave them,
Wow. So the
if you,
CapEx, basically, you're saying, like, you need to
yes,
give.
and it's very expensive.
Gotcha. And so that's the kind of game of chicken, is they don't want to do the CapEx because GM and Ford don't want to commit to this mega contract. So they're like, okay, well, we're not going to build a new mine. And then it's just kind of this.
So it's the trade-off here. But what you need is you cannot risk at 3 to 4% EV penetration already having a problem with raw materials. But I'm afraid in lithium hydroxide, I believe by the middle of next year, the market's going to be tight, especially if Tesla is going to hit 1 million units. So I understand why OEMs are reluctant,
Can you
because
break that down a little bit more though? Because now you're piquing my interest. You're like, 1 million units could be tough with this. So now this is where I'm like, okay, well, let's unpack this. Which.
Okay, so just as an example of the rate of growth that we're going, so um, you are going to have about 75,000 tons of lithium hydroxide used in batteries this year. Next year is going to jump to 125, and the year after that, 175. And when you talk about impurities in lithium hydroxide, they now don't talk in parts per million, they talk in parts per billion. They want very pure material. And it's very difficult to produce. So there is a cost curve out there. So I'm saying I understand the dilemma for OEMs, because one thing that people keep talking about is EV and ICE price parity. So it might be possible to have parity when the price of a battery pack drops to 100 kilowatt hours. But the OEM doesn't earn operating margin parity at that point, because right now OEMs sell you a cheap car, but they get the after sales servicing and the parts, which you won't get with an EV. They've either got to do accessories or do software as a service or autonomous or what have you, and that's a way off. So it's difficult. So the OEMs are fighting for margin, because on the upper end, where you should make a lot of money in luxury cars, you don't make as much on an EV.
Yeah, and that's why I almost don't even take them seriously, because you keep saying I'm like, it's going to be Amazon, the people with unlimited super cheap cost of capital that want to go EVs with a clean slate are the only people I'm even taking seriously. Like GM and Ford they're going to die before we even, like, their
Well, the
contract
one
with
thing
Albemarle gets done. Like.
Gali, the one thing I did raise my eyes at is when I looked at the GM Hummer, when they showed the standard model will come out in spring of 2024. I mean, that's too late.
Dude, like, I can't believe and then, like, the people that people even take it seriously is ridiculous to me. I'm like, dude, it comes out 3 years after the Cybertruck for triple the price with half the spec. I don't know. But it's interesting, because I feel like Tesla is really the only one with enough vision and now enough capital to really push this industry forward, and actually at the boardroom level have a CEO who wants to go all out and put the billions in, which is just what it takes. And then
But also they've done it brilliantly. So, and again, this is the whole thing of Do you have a closed mentality or do you have a growth mentality? Tesla is growth. Everyone said, oh, production hell, they failed, they can't do it. 3 years later, they got a casting machine and they're taking everyone to the cleaners. So, you know, it's interesting how people thought because they failed once, they're done. That's not how it works. That's not the West Coast mentality. They're moving quicker. And now they're doing cell technology, they're doing casting, they're doing everything all at once to get the, you know, the car competitive. And it's very hard from a closed mentality with people who are trying to defend a dividend or, you know, cover a pension liability or something else to now suddenly not have the vision and the mindset to say we're doing this and we're going to risk it. So VW is trying to an extent. But I agree with you, the others have got some work to do. Although I'll be honest, I think GM's partnership with LG, that's a good partner to have. But obviously, it's very difficult to, you know, spin your wheels and keep up with Tesla at the rate that they're going.